Joe Biden's aggressive cancer announcement has sparked backlash, several new accusations, and overall divided the internet. What really happened in that horrifying Mexican Navy Brooklyn bridge crash? A crazy New Orleans jailbreak has 7 escaped inmates on the run and tens of thousands of dollars up for grabs. What we've now learned around the IVF clinic bombing. Israel has now begun a new ground operation to take control of all of Gaza. And then a good news story to try and fail to keep you sane. We're talking about all that and much more on today's brand new Philip DeFranco show. You daily dive into the news, how it's being covered, and how people are reacting to it, starting with this. Was there a massive Joe Biden cancer cover-up? That is just one of the many questions and controversies that have stemmed from the news that the former president was just diagnosed with cancer, with his office yesterday releasing a statement saying, last week, President Joe Biden was seen for a new finding of a prostate nodule after experiencing increasing urinary symptoms. On Friday, he was diagnosed with prostate cancer characterized by a Gleason score of 9, grade group 5, with metastasis to the bone. And then adding, while this represents a more aggressive form of the disease, the cancer appears to be hormone sensitive, which allows for effective management. The president and his family are reviewing treatment options with his physicians. And so to put that into more layman's terms, metastasis means that the cancer is spread from its initial site, so in Biden's case, from his prostate to his bones. And that Gleason score, it means that the cancer is more likely to grow and spread. And so with that, naturally, we've seen people sharing condolences, including Kamala Harris and Barack Obama, who wish for a speedy recovery and added that Biden will fight this challenge head on. You even had some on the right playing nice, with Trump saying that he was saddened by the news and sending well wishes to the Biden family. I mean, hell, Marjorie Taylor Greene even seemingly found whatever pills she needed and put her muzzle back on and calling cancer truly awful and saying she'd pray for his family. And today you had Biden thanking everyone who sent him messages of support. But also, part of the news we've been seeing is that not everyone's messages were supportive. You had a ton of people focusing on Biden's health as it related to his hopes to hold on to political office, with, for example, USA Today writing that his diagnosis underscored growing questions and, among some top Democrats, anger about his initial decision to run for re-election despite signs of physical frailty and the reality of advanced age. Especially since in another timeline or universe, maybe Biden stayed in the race and even won, and he'd just be a few months into his new term with a cancer diagnosis. Right? And this notably comes as Democrats have already been having to deal with claims that Biden and his team were trying to cover up his ailing health. With some also questioning the timing of this announcement, because there's a new book titled Original Sin that's coming out this week, which is about President Biden's decline, its cover-up, and his disastrous choice to run again. Right, in the news that he has cancer has now added fuel to that fire. And it was actually something that Vice President J.D. Vance touched on while talking to reporters this morning.
We really do need to be honest about whether the former president was capable of doing the job. I don't think he was able to do a good job for the American people. And that's not politics. That's not because I disagreed with him on policy. That's because I don't think that he was in good enough health. In some ways, I blame him less than I blame the people around him. And why didn't the American people have a better sense of his health picture? Why didn't the American people have more accurate information about what he was actually dealing with? This is serious stuff. We can pray for good health, but also recognize that if you're not in good enough health to do the job, you shouldn't be doing the job.
Right, and also with that, we've seen many speculating that maybe Biden actually learned of his cancer while he was in office and hid it. And that, in part, because you have folks like one urologist telling News Nation that given the kind of medical care that Biden received in office, he could have known that he had this for a while. Also connected, but really separate from that, you had Donald Trump Jr. questioning when Biden found out about his cancer in a post that also seemingly took a shot at Jill Biden's doctorate in education. With him writing, what I want to know is, how did Dr. Jill Biden miss stage 5 metastatic cancer, or is this yet another cover-up? With that post then sparking backlash of its own from people who noted that it's pretty common information that Dr. Jill Biden is not a medical doctor, with many also calling Trump Jr. vile and rude for responding to Biden's cancer with this kind of rhetoric. But also here we saw general pushback to anyone that's been focusing on cover-up allegations and speculations, with the likes of Meghan McCain, for example, writing, I don't know if it's just my bias or background, but I don't want to hear anything else about Biden's health cover-up, tell-alls, interviews with staff, etc. Let the Biden family be in peace right now. This is all just so sad and imprudent. And this, as you had others countering claims that Biden may have actually known for a while, with, for example, one medical oncologist at Johns Hopkins telling the Washington Post that it would not be surprising if previous prostate exams failed to show cancer indications, as a better test is needed. But then even, all of that, it's just one slice of the backlash that this news has created. Because among other things, you had some people mocking Biden and his illness, or guessing how long he has left. You also had others who disagreed with Biden's policies, just refusing to show any sympathy or rooting for the cancer. For example, journalist Taylor Lorenz getting some heat for writing things like, hopefully he rots in hell and rests in piss, and saying Democrats have zero sympathy for the countless people Biden harmed and killed during his administration, but want to act like his cancer diagnosis means he's beyond critique for those actions. And that, as you had other commentators in the space like Hassan Piker facing backlash for joking about the news by, for example, sharing a headline about Biden's cancer diagnosis and writing, he's running in 2028, with him then later adding the mainstream media is already actively laundering the reputation of a war criminal who oversaw the genocide of Palestinians whose selfish nature allowed Trump to win a second term. Joe Biden is an awful monster. Prostate cancer doesn't change that. And so with that, while you had some supporting their words, you had many slamming what Taylor and Hassan said and thinking that it's insensitive to post comments like that at this time, with some reacting with takes like Marjorie Taylor Greene prays for Joe Biden's cancer recovery while Hassan Piker gloats and celebrates. As well as, maybe let's not play partisan games with a cancer diagnosis, okay? Joe Biden is a public servant. He deserves an opportunity to rest, be with his family, and have a fighting chance at recovery. Just be normal and pray for him. You know, with all that said, as this news is playing out on several different fronts in several different ways, I gotta ask you, where are you landing right now? Right? I mean that whether it be the timing of this announcement in relation to the big book release, the controversy and speculation around did or did they not know before this announcement, as well as, you know, just all the different reactions to this news, whether it be people sad and saying, leave the Bidens alone, or those that are celebrating and mocking. Any and all thoughts you have on that, I'd love to see in those comments down below, and we may talk about it more on tomorrow's comment commentary. But then from that, next up, we've got to talk about how a Mexican Navy ship crashed into the Brooklyn Bridge in New York City. Because while information is still coming in, there are a number of unanswered questions. What we do know is that 2 crew members that were aboard the ship have died and more than 20 others have been injured. We've also seen a ton of videos of the crash from every conceivable angle circulating online, with every single one of them just being horrifying. And as far as what we know, the ship in question is called the Cuauhtémoc. It was on a goodwill tour with plans to stop in places like New York, Jamaica, Spain, London, and way more. In fact, the AP reported that the schedule included visits to 22 ports and 15 nations over 254 days, with 170 of them being at sea. And as far as what happened in New York, contrary to what some have said, the Cuauhtémoc didn't actually arrive in New York on Sunday. Instead, it actually arrived in New York on May 13th, and it was open to visitors for a few days, with the plan then being for the ship to push off from Pier 17 Saturday night, head south, and set sail out of the New York harbor with a stop in Brooklyn to refuel before heading to Iceland. However, when they left the pier, it started moving in the wrong direction, going backwards towards the Brooklyn Bridge behind it, with then the top of the ship's mast running into the bottom of the bridge and breaking like twigs as the ship just kept moving. And at the time of the crash, there were 277 people on board, with many left dangling from the damaged masts and harnesses. And of those 22 people who were injured, according to Mexican naval officials, 11 of those are in critical condition. Also, contrary to what some have been saying online, there were reportedly no injuries from people on the bridge, and the bridge itself didn't take any structural damage, and all the lanes across were reopened after a brief closure following the crash. And then afterwards, as far as the Cuauhtémoc, it was moved further up the East River and docked at a different pier. Also, as far as reactions, you had both New York Mayor Adams and the Mexican president putting out statements about the crash, thanking first responders, expressing condolences about those who died, and promising more information as investigations unfold. But of course, one of the biggest questions right now is how the hell could this possibly happen? And again, while we want more information to come in, according to a preliminary investigation, the ship, quote, experienced a mechanical malfunction. With then an unnamed senior city official familiar with the investigation reportedly telling CNN it was the current that took it under the bridge. It wasn't supposed to be headed in that direction, and adding they had some sort of mechanical issue. They lost power, so without being able to use the rudder, they could not steer. But again, very important to note that those are just preliminary findings and obviously subject to change as the National Transportation Safety Board, the NYPD, and the Mexican government investigate further. But then, shifting gears from that to different news, we've got to talk about this horrifying IVF clinic bombing, the heroes who reacted to it, and the downright bizarre motivations of the guy who allegedly did it.
This was probably one of the largest bombing investigations that we've had in Southern California. Make no mistake, this is an intentional act of terrorism.
Right, so at around 11 a.m. Saturday, a car bomb reportedly detonated outside the American Reproductive Center, which is an IVF clinic in Palm Springs, with this enormous blast shattering windows 3 blocks away, and it was even felt in the town over, with some saying they thought it was an earthquake. But miraculously, although it damaged the clinic's office space, the explosion reportedly left the actual lab unharmed. And according to police, an FBI agent and a firefighter rushed into the building, which at the time appeared to be on the brink of collapse, to save the embryos and medical records. Right, because even if they're intact, the embryos embryos could still die if the refrigeration system's disrupted. And then of course, losing the records, it could destroy the dreams of aspiring parents who spent months or years, not to mention tens of thousands of dollars, trying to have a baby. And so this pair, who many are calling heroes, they reportedly confirmed that the fridges were functioning and emerged carrying paperwork to safety. Also, while several people were reportedly injured, fortunately, the only fatality appears to be the suspected bomber himself. And as far as what we know about him, reportedly he was 25 years old, he was former military, he tried to live stream the attack, and according to police, he acted alone. But what's really striking about his profile is his stated motivations. Because apparently, he left behind writings in which he identifies as a pro-mortalist, which if you don't know it, basically means that he believed in bringing about his own and others' deaths as quickly as possible to prevent your future suffering, and more importantly, the suffering your existence will cause to all other sentient beings. With him saying, understand your death is already a guarantee, all a pro-mortalist is saying is, let's make it happen sooner rather than later to prevent your future suffering. With him then also adding in an audio recording. Basically, it just comes down to, I'm angry that I exist and that, nobody got my consent to bring me here. And then, of IVF clinics specifically, he said, these are people who are having kids after they've sat there and thought about it, and asking how much more stupid can it get? But ultimately, while we wait for more information, that is what we know about one of the more disturbing terror attacks we've seen recently. Though fortunately, the only person this monster was able to take out was himself. So while I'm horrified and saddened and hope that the victims of this attack, they recover from their injuries, there is one less monster on this planet. Then, to shift gears from that, if you are in or near Louisiana, and I don't know, you want to have like a side hobby that kind of brings in a little extra money, the economy is weird right now. Right now, you could win up to $140,000. And all you gotta do is catch 7 escaped violent criminals who are considered armed and dangerous. Because while initially there were 10 of them, 3 were quickly caught, and the FBI, ATF, and Crime Stoppers are offering $20,000 each for the remaining ones. And they're offering this cash because reportedly Friday, when deputies the New Orleans Parish Jail did their routine head count, they discovered that the men were missing. And apparently, the escapees were having some fun with this because they reportedly left parting messages on the wall like, catch us when you can, a smiley face with its tongue out, and too easy, LOL, with an arrow pointing to the hole. And as far as what actually went down, according to the authorities, the breakout occurred the previous night while everyone was supposed to be asleep. The inmates allegedly just yanking their sliding cell door off its tracks at around 12:23 a.m. and then sneaking into a neighboring handicap cell. Meanwhile, a civilian employee who should have seen them had reportedly left to get food. Also, notably, even after moving the toilet, the inmates shouldn't have been able to actually get through the hole since there's usually a crosshatch of metal bars combined with metal plumbing bolted into the concrete. But according to authorities, somehow at least one steel bar protecting plumbing fixtures appeared to have been intentionally cut using a tool. And so one by one, it's believed they squeezed through, then making their way to a door by the docks where supplies are brought in, and then they scaled a jail wall using blankets to cover the razor wire. With them then allegedly running across 9 lanes of Interstate 10, stripping off their jail uniforms, and making off into the night. And with this, a big thing is while the police are looking for these men, they also suspect that others may be involved, even including within law enforcement.
We have indication that these detainees received assistance in their escape from individuals inside of our department. It's almost impossible, not completely, but almost impossible for anybody to get out of this facility without help from the outside.
So right now, reportedly 3 sheriff's office employees have been put on administrative leave, and you have the FBI believing that more people are still helping the inmates evade capture. All of which is very concerning, especially because these seem to be some really bad guys. More than half of the escapees are either charged with or convicted of murder or attempted murder, and the rest are accused of armed robbery, aggravated assault, and numerous gun crimes. So at least a dozen law enforcement agencies, including the FBI and U.S. Marshals, have spent the weekend hunting for them. And with that, you had state troopers IDing one man through facial recognition software in the French Quarter about 3 miles from the jail, with him hiding under a car in a hotel parking garage and catching him after a brief foot chase on Friday. And then, later that same day, you had police saying they caught 2 more, but no more have been found, at least as of recording. So with that, on Sunday, you had the Louisiana State Police Superintendent saying,
"We're confident this time that we have actionable intelligence on all 7 of those fugitives, and we hope in the coming days, if not the coming hours, that we have them all apprehended, but we need the public's help."
While we're waiting to see if they get these guys, everyone is pointing fingers trying to figure out who to blame. With you seeing, among other things, Republican Governor Jeff Landry saying he's ordered the Attorney General to investigate the jailbreak, the Corrections Department to audit the jail, and the Inspector General to get a list of all pretrial detainees and convicts awaiting sentences in the jail. And Landry then took the time to slam his political enemies for what he calls an overtly soft justice system.
Prosecutors who dismiss cases and release violent criminals must be addressed. 5 of these escapees had been charged while in jail. Their charges were refused by the district attorney. Prosecutors who are unprepared and delay cases for years must be addressed in this court system. 9 of the 10 escapees have been in the pretrial stages in OPCC for years now. I hope that everyone understands that the video of those prisoners escaping epitomizes a progressive criminal justice system.
You know, with this, others, including most notably the sheriff, have pointed to the jail itself being underfunded, understaffed, and overcrowded as the reason why this happened.
This incident has once again highlighted the critical need for repairs and upgrades to our facilities, particularly to ensure that doors and locks are fully functional. We still need 150 deputies in this jail and another 50 for the new jail about to open.
And then I've got more news for you in just a minute, but first, to be honest, I thought I had my money game on lock until RocketMoney proved me wrong. It turns out I was leaking cash on forgotten subscriptions, unused apps, dusty streaming services, and even a free trial from last year, and RocketMoney spotted it all. So a huge save by today's sponsor, RocketMoney, and dare I say, today's financial superhero. Because RocketMoney is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. Hell, they'll even actually negotiate your bills for you. So if you're overpaying for internet, cable, phone, RocketMoney will deal with customer service so you don't have to. And their dashboard, it helped me see where my money was going, set budgets, and track my spending trends. And their goals feature, it made saving feel doable. Even small amounts have started adding up. And all this is RocketMoney has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Maybe just like you, I didn't think I needed the help, but RocketMoney, it helped me clean up my finances fast. So if you're trying to save more, stress less, and stop wasting money, this is the move. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with RocketMoney. Just go to rocketmoney.com/PDS today. That's rocketmoney.com/PDS, rocketmoney.com/PDS. But then, next up from that, Israel just launched an all-new large-scale offensive in Gaza, with the Israeli army announcing what it called extensive ground operations, and Israeli PM Benjamin Netanyahu claiming that the military will take full control over the whole of the territory. And so with that, the country is seemingly following through on a plan previously approved by the country's security cabinet to forcibly displace virtually all of the 2 million Palestinians that are left in the enclave and flatten almost any building that remains standing. And all of that is, notably, you have the UN reporting today that 92% of homes in Gaza have already been destroyed or damaged, all while countless people have been displaced multiple times. And in fact, with that, we've already seen the IDF ordering the evacuation of the second largest city in Gaza today for what it described as an unprecedented attack. With this being as reportedly Israeli strikes over just the past 72 hours leading up to this morning killed more than 300 people, many of them women and children. With, for example, in one case, an attack on a school turned shelter inside of a refugee camp, reportedly killing 5 people, including a woman and a girl, and wounded 18, mostly children, according to the hospital that received the casualties. And beyond that, this past week, it's been one of the deadliest weeks in Gaza in months. Last Tuesday, for example, Israeli strikes near a hospital reportedly killed at least 28. And the next day, Israeli bombing reportedly killed as many as 80 people, including at least 22 children. And then from Thursday morning through Friday, the Israeli military reportedly killed more than 250 people. And so now, according to the territory's health ministry, the total direct death toll has passed 53,000, with most of them being women and children. And this is notably several thousand have been killed since an Israeli-Hamas ceasefire went into effect back in mid-January. Because as you might remember, after the first 6-week phase of that deal expired on March 1st, Israel refused to move on to a second phase that would have aimed at ending the war and getting all the remaining hostages released. And this is, you then had Hamas rejecting an alternative Israeli proposal, and the Israeli government then cutting off all supplies to Gaza and relaunching its offensive. And actually with that, you now have Netanyahu's office announcing that alongside the latest offensive, that it would be allowing a, quote, basic amount of food into the territory to ensure that a hunger crisis does not develop in the Gaza Strip. Though this notably, as aid groups and experts say, the people of Gaza are looking at hunger crisis in the rearview mirror. With widely believed it's way past that, and a UN panel saying just 1 week ago that the enclave's entire population of over 2.1 million people are facing a risk of famine, and saying that that famine has been made worse by Israel's 11-week blocking of aid. And to that point, since the aid blockade began on March 2nd, 57 children have reportedly died from malnutrition, according to Gaza's health ministry. And that, as the World Health Organization said, that number, it's likely an underestimate and is likely to increase. And saying that if the situation persists, nearly 71,000 children under the age of 5 are expected to be acutely malnourished over the next 11 months. And so that prospect of a basic amount of food getting in, it's not really reassuring anyone, especially now that Israel has put forward a new plan to distribute humanitarian aid from a series of hubs run by private contractors and protected by Israeli troops. Because while the US has backed the plan, aid groups have notably refused to participate, with them saying that there's no evidence elements of Israel's justification for the plan, which is that Hamas steals a significant chunk of aid to fund its operations. And that is, they went on to describe it as dangerous and potentially unlawful because it could lead to the forced mass transfer of Palestinians. With seeing, for example, UN aid chief Tom Fletcher describing it as a cynical sideshow and a deliberate distraction, and calling on the UN Security Council to act decisively to prevent genocide and to ensure respect for international humanitarian law. Which I will say, on that note, we've also recently had rights groups like Amnesty International repeating the accusation of genocide against Israel, and you have people like the UN rights chief saying that Israel's recent actions appear to be a push for a permanent demographic shift in Gaza that is in defiance of international law and is tantamount to ethnic cleansing. Also of note with that, on Sunday you had Netanyahu suggesting that Israel would actually be open to striking a deal with Hamas that involved ending the fighting, but then at the same time you had him laying out conditions that have been repeatedly rejected by Hamas, including the exile of its leaders and the disarmament of the Gaza Strip. Also, while we're seeing all this play out, you have the US still pushing for an updated ceasefire. Right, and what's currently on the table would reportedly involve the release of 10 of the 20 or so remaining living hostages in exchange for a 45 to 60-day ceasefire, with Israel then also releasing hundreds of Palestinians from its jails. But then also, notably, what would really set it apart from previous proposals is that it reportedly offers some type of US-backed guarantee to ensure that talks about a permanent end to the war actually take place. And with that, you had one source telling Axios, the new offer tries to give Hamas confidence that it's worth moving forward with a partial deal now because it could lead to the end of the war later on. You know, with that, as far as the US role in all this, one of the things worth noting is that some people have been arguing that Trump is shaking up US-Israel relations in a way that no one really has in decades. Right? I mean, just last week, for example, he opted not to meet with Netanyahu on his trip to the region. He's also gone around Israel twice in the past month to make deals with militant groups opposed to Israel. With that, including Hamas last week, which released an Israeli-American hostage as a gesture of goodwill. And then earlier this month, he worked with the Houthis, which agreed to stop attacking American ships in the Red Sea, even as the group pledged to continue fighting Israel. With a notably, this week, Vice President J.D. Vance reportedly considering traveling to Israel, but then deciding against it. And the reason there was allegedly that they didn't want to give the impression that the White House endorsed the Israeli government's decision to launch a massive operation at a time when the U.S. is pushing for a deal. But with that said, there really has not been a sign that the White House has any interest in restraining Israel when it comes to its war on Gaza. I mean, even as you had Trump voicing concern about the humanitarian situation in Gaza, you also had him saying that someone should just let the United States get involved and make it just a freedom zone. So it remains to be seen how all of this is going to play out, if the dynamic between the US and Israel is really shifting, and what else is going to come from this. But then, next up in other news we got to talk about, the UK and EU just hit the reset button, or at least that is how the two sides are framing this massive post-Brexit deal that they just struck, which does away with some of the barriers to trade and travel that was introduced after the country voted to leave the European Union nearly a decade ago. With this new agreement also aiming to boost security cooperation in light of the war that's been raging in Ukraine and the US no longer being seen as a reliable ally. But also, notably with all this, the deal isn't without controversy, especially in the UK. Because for one, PM Keir Starmer's popularity is at an all-time low, with just 23% of Brits having a favorable view of him, according to a recent poll. And that is the far-right Reform UK party, which is led by Nigel Farage, a man who's widely seen as something like the man behind Brexit, is growing in popularity and recently won big in local elections. So with that, you have Starmer's government insisting, this isn't backtracking on Brexit and saying the deal, it meets the red line set out in the government's manifesto: no return to the single market, no return to the customs union, and no return to freedom of movement. But that, as you have Reform UK and other right-wing politicians and right-wing media outlets describing the deal as surrender or capitulation. And one of the big specific things is they're accusing Starmer of selling out the fishing industry. Because one of the most divisive issues with this whole thing, it has to do with whether European ships should still be able to fish in British territorial waters. And in the end, what happened is, with debate reportedly dragging on until nearly the last minute, the two sides agreed that EU vessels should hang on to their fishing rights until June 30th, 2038. Within the UK, in exchange, facing fewer barriers when it comes to exporting food products into the EU. And in fact, with that, you have some routine checks on animal and plant products set to be removed completely, allowing products like British sausages and burgers to be sold back into the EU again. Which is actually pretty huge, because while the EU is still the UK's largest trading partner, the country has been hit with a massive 21% drop in exports since Brexit, largely due to more burdensome border checks, increased paperwork, and other non-tariff barriers. But also, with that said, the 12-year extension was much longer than the UK initially suggested. And while it also, on the other side, was not the indefinite extension that some in the EU had wanted, you still had Starmer having to fight off criticism that he had screwed over British fishermen, calling the deal a win-win. And that, as he also pointed to the agreement's other components, including, for example, measures making it easier for people from the UK to travel to Europe. And specifically, they're allowing them to use e-gates in European airports instead of waiting in long lines to have their passports physically checked at border control. But there are also then being plans for a new program to allow young Europeans to work in Britain and vice versa. Though notably, with this also being a hot button issue in the UK and Starmer and the Labour Party recently shifting to the right to appease the likes of Reform UK, you had the government emphasizing that that the new program would limit the time foreigners could spend in Britain and that their numbers would also be capped. But ultimately, the exact details of the scheme, they still have to be worked out. And actually with that, negotiations on several issues are going to be continuing over the next several months. With seeing both sides agreeing to what they called a common understanding of the topics that they want to work together on more. Things including energy, agri-food rules, climate, migration, and policing. That then also brings us to the last thing we have to talk about, and that is defense and security. Because notably, former Prime Minister Boris Johnson rejected the idea of a security pact with the EU when he negotiated his country's exit from the bloc. Now, that is exactly what we're seeing, with the main takeaway being that the deal paves the way for the UK participating in an all-new €150 billion joint defense fund, which is a fund that will distribute money to countries to invest in everything from ammo to drones to the protection of critical infrastructure. For now, we're gonna have to wait to see how this plays out, see where the new cooperation leads in general, but then also specifically in terms of potential backlash in the UK. But then, shifting gears from that, let's talk about this news about an absolutely massive medical advancement that could change the lives of countless people. Because Dr. Indy Gill and Dr. Nima Nassiri just performed the first human bladder transplant ever, which understand is a huge deal because up until this point, most patients who had to have parts of their bladder removed ended up having parts of their intestines repurposed to help them pass urine. And the built-in problem with that is that the intestinal tissue is littered with bacteria, so matching it up with the inherently sterile urinary tract, it doesn't usually end well. With in fact, Dr. Gill saying that 80% of patients experience complications ranging from electrolyte shortages to reduction in kidney function. And that's without getting into all the digestive issues that can pop up when you lose a section of your intestines. Now with that said, with what we're seeing today, understand that the solution to these problems, it didn't just appear out of the blue. Dr. Gill and Dr. Nassiri have actually been workshopping approaches to bladder transplants for years now. First, testing both robotic and manual techniques on pigs, and then human cadavers, and then human research donors who don't have any brain function but still have a heartbeat. And only then, once they had perfected their strategy, they drew up plans for a clinical trial and found the perfect first patient, a 41-year-old man by the name of Oscar. Because you see, Oscar has had a slew of health issues related to his kidneys and bladder. And back in 2020, Dr. Nassiri actually removed both of Oscar's kidneys in response to his battle with late-stage kidney disease and renal cancer. And then actually on top of that, Oscar also survived a rare type of bladder cancer, and the surgery to remove the tumor, it left him without much of a bladder at all. And by the time that Dr. Gill and Dr. Nassiri were actually ready for their clinical trial on bladder transplants, Oscar's years of dialysis, they were beginning to fail. Fluid was building up in his body, and he had so much scarring on his abdomen that it would have been difficult to find a usable section of intestine for another option to be possible. And so you had Dr. Nassiri saying he showed up serendipitously, but he was kind of an ideal first candidate for this. With then all of that bringing us to the day that a bladder match became ready for Oscar. And so you had Dr. Gill and Dr. Nassiri going to the headquarters of One Legacy, which is an organ procurement organization in California, and they joined a team of 7 surgeons working overnight to retrieve a bunch of organs from the donor. With them then bringing the bladder and the kidney to UCLA, and after a shower and a nap, they performed the 8-hour surgery to give Oscar a new bladder and kidney the same day. And notably, kidney transplants can sometimes take up to a week to process urine, and Oscar, the connection between the new kidney and bladder, it was immediate. Also, his creatinine level, which measures kidney function, improved immediately. And the good news also doesn't stop there, because, a new bladder, it doesn't have the same nerve ending, so doctors were worried that Oscar wasn't going to be able to feel that his bladder was full, let alone hold or empty it naturally. But then, during his first follow-up appointment, when Dr. Nassiri removed the catheter and gave him fluids, Oscar said that he felt that he could go pee naturally. With Dr. Gill saying that his jaw was on the floor when he got the call from Dr. Nassiri, and he rushed over to the hospital as soon as possible to watch Oscar pee again. Which I know, out of context, sounds like a weird sentence, but in this one, fantastic. So of course, he wanted to temper expectations, saying, of course, this is very, very early. Let's see how everything goes. But adding, it's the first time he's been able to pee in 7 years. For all of us, this is huge. And, with all this, as far as what's next, understand that Oscar, he's just the first of this clinical trial. Right? The doctors are planning on performing transplants on 4 more patients to get an idea of things like bladder capacity and graft complications before pursuing a larger trial. But also, understand, they say this is definitely the first step in, quote, the realization of a dream for treating thousands of patients with crippling pelvic pain, inflammation, and recurring infections. And Dr. Gill adding, there is no question a potential door has been opened for these people that did not exist earlier. So great news, hopeful news, and hopefully just a little bit of more to come. But then, finally today, let's talk about y'all's comments on the last show and some commentary brought to you by BeautifulBastard.com, where right now you can get any and all of our best-selling tees for 15% off if you use code PDS15. Wear your feelings and feel incredibly comfortable and look fantastic in our brand new Beautiful Bastard tees. With that said, in those comments, while on that Thursday show, I felt like I was having a stroke when I was reading the Trump quote, apparently I was not alone in that. With, for example, Marco saying when Phil said, "Oh my God, I thought I was having a stroke," I burst out laughing and had to replay it 3 times because 1, I thought I was having a stroke while listening to Phil say that. 2, I was thinking, was Trump having a stroke? And 3, how many others thought the same thing? Oh my God, Phil, I felt how you felt at the same time. And judging by the likes there and the just sheer number of comments that said similar things, we were not alone. So 1, I'm glad an editor deciding to keep in a blooper paid off. But 2, I will say, I do feel like that a lot when reading a number of Trump quotes. I know that he calls it like the art of the weave, but it feels like the art of the sundowning. And then you pair that with the sheer number of answers he's given where he's like, I don't know. And then you'll have some wondering why a certain percentage of the population thinks that it's actually Stephen Miller and a bunch of billionaires running the country and Trump's just kind of the figurehead. Which I will say, to turn it into a bigger topic and not just fucking Trump, whether it be Trump, whether it be Biden, whether it be any of these old motherfuckers where you just see them slipping off. Like, we need age limits. I've said that in my 20s. I say that as at the end of this year, I'm gonna turn 40. I'm gonna say that if I get to 60. I mean, genuinely think about it. We live in a country where they make air traffic controllers retire when they're 56, or if they're like super exceptional, they can retire at the latest at like 61 years old. But then we're like, yeah, no, but if you're 80,000 years old, you can run the country. Like, how many decisions, whether day to day or comprehensive packages, affect just unthinkable amounts of people's lives, whether they live or die, whether they thrive or suffer? And I think, at least now more than ever for the general public, you can have an understandable and expanded distrust of the health of those people because of the shit that we've seen over the recent years. But anyway, off my little soapbox there and on to another comment about a different story where you had wayfaring strangers saying not regulating AI is going to hurt us on many levels. Jenny Nobody then replying, it won't hurt the rich though, so it's all good. As well as Nika Art saying, I'm just a freelance artist and I cannot properly express how sheerly heartbreaking and disheartening it is to see Gen AI so widely lauded and accepted. People are just now starting to understand why and how it can be bad for them. They didn't care when it was just a drawing or just music or just voices. They laughed at us in the creative industries for being upset and ringing the warning bells on it. But now there are entire companies dedicated to telling other companies to stop hiring humans and only hire AI. There are lawyers using AI in court, teachers and students using AI to learn and teach. So many people are enamored with the future that they aren't stopping to see what's going on. I'm scared. I'm terrified. Those comments, especially the last one, it hits how this is kind of an everyone issue. Right? Yeah, it definitely impacted the creative fields first. And I think what we're going to see more and more of is it kind of going into the more menial and then physical jobs. Though I will say, I do wonder how this is going to play out over, let's say, the next 2 to 5 years. Because without a doubt, and this touches on the comment that said it's not going to affect the rich, CEOs, heads of business, yeah, they're going to be looking for ways that AI or maybe even humanoid robots and physical automation can replace humans. And while that is 100% horrifying, I'm also interested to see what happens to the entrepreneur that has no money or just a couple of bucks in their pocket and how they're able to take advantage of this. Because whatever your feelings are around AI, and I know that that can be kind of multifaceted because you can have different feelings about AI when it comes to the stealing of artwork and the use and how it's been training there versus kind of a more like, hey, I have this idea, or how should I organize this sort of AI-esque? But as you're seeing the market adopt it more and more, people are feeling like, oh my God, if I don't jump on this as well, then I'm gonna get left behind. So then, to continue my ramble here, one of the areas I'm most interested in is how it's gonna affect the ad space in relation to search. Things like ChatGPT shopping's gotten a lot of attention, especially over the last week. And then when you compare like Google's AI responses when you search compared to ChatGPT or other options, it seems like ChatGPT is way better. But there also seeming to be a meaningful shift in people choosing that over Google, which is kind of a commonplace thing, which then makes me wonder if Alphabet's going to go, oh, YouTube's even more important to us than ever. So what is that going to do to the ad experience on YouTube? We'll see what happens. It's not like Google hasn't seen this coming and they're trying to soften the blow or figure out a smart way to pivot in the meantime. But yeah, it brings us back to the main point of the news and even the comments that we were talking about, and that is that regulation is going to be one of the most important things over the next few years. So as we've seen in so many different places, the legislation around new emerging tech is usually so many years behind and then almost always fails to catch up properly. But that, my friends, is the end of your Monday evening, Tuesday morning dive into the news. Thank you for watching. Remember, I love yo faces, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow because I got a brand new show for you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. Stay safe out there.